We are the only thing standing between you and drinks, and knowing that, we will be brief and not take up your time, but we slotted this in just to talk a little bit about Twitter. And I think before we do, it's for those of you who are aficionados of Elon Musk, you should know the Solar City decision was issued today. And apparently there is a new Elon Musk rule, which is even if entire fairness applies, it is fair. And so the case was dismissed.
Entire fairness is not a crime.
Entire fairness is not a crime. That is so true. Well said by a man of your age, Mr. Klingsberg. So I wonder if you could just talk maybe about 2 minutes about the highlights. I mean, one of the things that struck me when we slotted this in a week ago was the interesting issues were, 13D to 13G, had he even filed HSR? There's now a 10b5 claim out there on those issues. But now we have a merger agreement and a deal and a stock price that's trading off, let's say, more today than it was. But certainly people are betting that the deal won't happen. And I wonder what your thoughts were about it.
Well, I guess there's a couple of lessons. One, just looking at the whole evolution of unsolicited M&A, there was talk about tender offers and, he's completely off cycle to run a proxy contest, right? Because he would have had to wait an entire year because he missed the advance notice window. So they really could have strung him out for quite a while on that.
And they still haven't been able to get rid of their staggered board.
Yeah, and there's staggered board. So all these things, but the amazing thing is, remember, at its foundation, unsolicited M&A really, when you're going public, is all about the shareholders and all about the market, right? So sometimes you have young bankers come in and they're like, well, there's a poison pill. We can never get around that. What are we going to do? It's all about the momentum in the market and where the market is. And it's something you see. I have clients on East and West Coast with dual class shares, and you think they're completely insulated. But meanwhile, you go to the board meetings and the independent directors are really conscious of being criticized by shareholders. And what my point in all this is the disintermediation through vehicles like Twitter, and Elon Musk is probably one of the leaders in this, the disintermediation between investors and the boardroom has reached such a level that you could be out there going public with an unsolicited proposal, completely off cycle. You don't have to go through the whole dance of the proxy contest.
But if it wasn't Elon Musk, if you think about it, the evolution of the bid was pretty interesting, right? If Elon Musk had come to you a month ago and said, I want to take over Twitter, would you have structured it the way he did?
Well, that's the thing. It's not, it's so old school to sit there and say, well, Elon, you're going to have to wait until next year to run your proxy contest. Why don't you wait a little bit because you're outside the advance notice window. And, then we're going to have to gin up a tender offer document to show that you're really serious. He didn't have to do any of that. He got the momentum going with shareholders, with investors. He got the momentum going. The board was feeling the pressure through other means, through other vehicles, and that can happen now because it's not a stodgy, slow motion process anymore. I think for boards to feel what's going on in the shareholder base and to be hypersensitive to that.
So you look at the merger agreement, and I'm not writing the Deal Professor column, but I was reading it, and then of course the reporters were calling. And it reads like a pretty plain vanilla merger agreement, $1 billion break fee on either side. It looks like a private equity deal with specific performance. I think the thing that struck me about the deal was two things. One is, when you look at the conditions to closing, it says foreign security clearances, which is CFIUS. So it's clear that he's going to try and find some sovereign wealth fund to syndicate the equity to. And I think the second interesting thing about this deal is really the actions in the financing letters, right?
Yeah, that's where the action is.
So we were talking about that. Do you want to talk about what you're saying?
Sure. There's a couple of points where things could go. One is, you're right, he's got to try and raise money, right? because I think it's clear that in his equity commitment letter, he has the right to go out and raise money. He said in his proposal letter that he could raise money from others. And there's restrictions saying you can't go out and do that if it's going to suddenly result in regulatory impediments that are going to delay the deal. But the other point is if he doesn't do that, he's really in a potential risk because he's got on the margin loan, which as is typical, if the stock price trades down low enough on the Tesla stock, which is the collateral, then he's got to put more stock in there. And if he's got to sell Tesla stock in order to pay the other, to pay the equity commitment, which is separate from the margin loan, then that could cause that stock price to go down, and then you hit exactly right the death spiral, where all of a sudden you have to keep putting more money into the margin loan, and you're having to sell more Tesla stock. So that's, I think, what he's got to really try and avoid that. And the way
so there's an evil hedge fund out there that's going to short Twitter and push down Tesla shares. Finally,
there's a lot of reasons why he could be very successful in raising and bringing in co-investors. So I wouldn't bet too much on that.
Yeah,
necessarily.
I think the other thing that struck me is, and again, it's hard to note when the media is in histrionics or not, but the cultural issue, right? So there's been this issue of, Twitter's culture, and Elon Musk is gonna, God forbid, fight for free speech and how terrible that would be. And I know that people might disagree with that, but this is really where Revlon meets the road, right? Those cultural issues don't matter once the company decides to sell.
Yeah, that's true for cash. That's what Lori will tell you. But, the board, I think the board, we haven't seen the board book and, how it looks. But, if they really wanted to hold this thing together, I imagine that the board may have been able to come up with a story that would have worked.
They were moving quick, though. They had good lawyers on both sides, as you know. But moving quick, people make mistakes. And so maybe we're back to the Elon Musk rule of Solar City, which is it wasn't quite perfect, but it's fair enough, right?
Maybe. We'll see. I guess tomorrow they report earnings. So let's see.
Yeah.